Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You're listening to a new episode of the Leadership Student Podcast with MK Palmore. We are all lifelong learners, and nowhere is this more relevant than in the practice of leadership. Our goal is continual learning and improvement. Let's get after it. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hey folks, this is MK Palmore. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Student Podcast. This week we have Gene Fay, who is the CEO of ThreatX, which is a cybersecurity company concentrating in the secure API and application space based in Boston. Gene is a longtime leader, security guru, and we're going to have a conversation with him about leadership, talk a little bit about his leadership journey, and hopefully extract some gems out of that conversation. So, Gene, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome, MK. Really appreciate the opportunity. And for our listeners, MK was just on my podcast, so I'm super excited to do his podcast, and should be a good, really good conversation, judging on how our conversation went during recording of the Executive Security podcast.
Yeah, awesome. A little reciprocity here. I certainly appreciate you joining me here on the Leadership Student. Gene, I've been having these conversations with guests throughout the industry, and quite frankly, across several different industry verticals. I've been passionate about the topic of leadership nearly my entire life, and I think that I personally always get something out of these conversations, and I'm sure my listeners will as well. So, for those maybe that are unfamiliar with ThreatX, why don't we start there?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the ThreatX story, how the company was founded, and where you guys, what space you guys occupy in the technology sector.
Absolutely. So the company now has been around for a little over 9 years. I'm not one of the founders. I do work closely with our two founders, Andreas Usix and Brett Settle, but they started the company originally in Texas, moved it to Colorado. When I took over, officially our headquarters is still in Colorado, but about 50% of our team now is based in New England, and we have an office in New Hampshire as well as in Boston. So it's been a great run. I've been here for 3 years, and when I got here, really, typically when a new CEO comes in to take over for a founder-led company, the advice you get is get rid of the founders. Because they're not always their idea to bring in an executive over them, and they get rather a lot of animosity. But I'm really happy to say at ThreatX, I work really closely with both founders as well as the rest of the leadership team and the whole team to really drive our business. And we're focused on API and application protection, which Gartner states is APIs are the most attacked vector today. So somebody's bad news is somebody's good news. All these corporate websites that are getting hit and their APIs are getting attacked. We have a great solution. So we've got lots of big corporate customers, which I won't name any of them, so they don't yell at me for using their name in a public format. But lots of really global brands that we use. Basically, we have software that sits between their website and the World Wide Web, and we make sure the bad guys don't get through.
What size company are we talking about in terms of personnel?
So we are 50 people. So I think we'll probably maybe not double next year, but growing at a good clip. But it's a great size to be a part of the company, as well as from my perspective to be the leader of the company. I'm doing one-on-ones with all of our employees this quarter. And I say to all of them, I'm like, the reason I work for a 50-person company is because I can spend time on these types of calls doing one-on-ones and getting to know them and their life's ambitions and their likes and dislikes about ThreatX, and then equally do something about it. So it's a really fun size. Now I'm looking forward to when we're 300, 400, 500 people, and we have all the potential to do that, and it'll be a very different company when we do it. But 50 is a great size.
Yeah, and I mean, 300-400 people will make your ability to have that kind of access to employees at all
Awesome.
levels very
Yeah.
different. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll
I mean, it'll be
change the nature of
group
the culture.
meetings. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. I say to the 50 people, I'm like, it's awesome to get to know you. When we bring in our 251st person, I'm probably not going to be able to offer my cell phone and say, hey, call me anytime. I mean, I will, but my ability to get to know that person versus at 50, where I can do some mentoring and coaching and equally get feedback. They feel comfortable enough at 50 to really do that. So it is, again, a fun size company to be a part of.
right.
Awesome.
So, Gene, I want to take it back a little bit and maybe talk about your career trajectory, where you got started in the industry, and take us all the way up to your position with ThreadX. So, tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Sure, absolutely. So I tell the professional story to tell a little personal story because I think it sets a tone to how I end up where I am. I grew up in a town called Cranford, New Jersey, on the poorer side of town, but grew up with some kids with money, some kids that didn't have money. I was poor, maybe on the had parents that were hardworking, but there wasn't. I always say there's a lot of trust, but there won't be any funds at the end of it. But my parents, hardworking people. My father worked for the county, and my mother was a nurse. And when I graduated college, their advice was find the biggest company and find out what the retirement package was. And I was 21, 22, and I was like, I said, I'm going to go into high tech sales. I said, no, you don't go into sales. Like you don't never take a job where you don't know exactly how much money you're going to make, and don't take any risk. Again, go work for a big company. Well, I didn't follow their advice, though it was great advice. And I've got a brother who's a retired police officer, a sister who's a very successful teacher. They did follow that more conservative approach, but I really wanted to do something. What I didn't know, necessarily entrepreneurial. I knew I aspired and had a willingness to take big risks, and and I've done that. So I've worked for 6 startups. One of them I started on my own. The rest I joined early, usually sub $1 million or sub revenue, and it's a big part of what ultimately allowed me to become the CEO today, and that is underlying taking leadership roles or demonstrating leadership capabilities, even when I wasn't the leader. When I think about working at a moving company, there's 3 guys, nobody's really in charge, but I made it my point to be the unofficial crew chief. Like, okay, I'll deal with the customer and that sort of stuff. And even when I had different sales roles where I wasn't the district sales manager or the sales leader on the team, I always let the junior people know, or the people that were just joining, like, hey, call me. I'm more than willing to tell you how the job's done and what needs to be done. And I think that's probably maybe first piece of advice is like, if you want to become a leader, act like a leader. Now, don't boss people around when you're not in charge, but establish that people can come to you, give people a level of trust, that you can help to guide them and help them to become better at whatever type of team you're leading, or I should say whatever part of a team you're a part of. Help everybody by leading by example and demonstrating leadership capabilities, and offering to help those that are new to the team.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic concept. In the military, we call that lead from where you stand, regardless of what your
Yeah,
position happens to be. In this particular scenario, wherever you happen to be in the team, maybe you're not the designated team leader, but you're a part of it. And I think people are consistently looking for that kind of guidance and for folks to
yeah,
step up and sort of take those leadership roles. So that's an outstanding example of how anyone can be a leader, even if you're not in the designated position of
yeah,
leadership.
yeah, absolutely.
So you sort of have this ethos about stepping in, making sure that you're accountable, being a leader on your own. How has that helped you throughout your career? You mentioned a couple of entrepreneurial endeavors. I have to
Yeah,
suspect that the it probably shows an ability on your part to build teams quickly, maybe from the agile aspect of it. Can you talk a little bit about what all goes into that kind of team building and what you've seen work and not work?
Yeah, I think when it comes to being a part of a team and then building teams, I was just happened to have a guy giving me a price on a generator. He's probably in his 60s, and he's developed a small business of 35 people. And he said it perfectly. He's like, he's just, surround yourself with great people, and great things happen. And I think that's a part of what it is to create a team, which is first develop what is the social norms that you think you want to create in your team, and then go hire people that best demonstrate those types of similar cultural values, and instill those types of things. And part of it is selecting those right people, and equally getting rid of those people that maybe don't necessarily demonstrate the core values of the team. They might be super talented, but they're not socially in the same vibe, in the same cultural set of norms. So you got to be willing to sometimes get rid of those types of people to establish it. But when I look at having my own business and having 5 or 6 people, or leading a team of 250 people, I always look at the underlying success or failure of that group. And there's a lot of things outside of your control, but the cultural norms that you create, and you don't as a leader create them, they do get created, but you start with a framework of, hey, I always say to people, I haven't made enough money to retire, but I've made enough money to not have to deal with a-holes all the time, or work with them. And I think that's kind of one of my underlying thesis is like, hey, I'm still willing to work 80 hours a week at 54 years old. I love what I'm doing, but I won't do it for people that I don't think are good people. I can decide not to do that, right? And I think those are the types of things that I try to instill in my team. Like, hey, if we have this super talented engineer, but yet they're a terrible person to work with, and they just don't fit into who we are and what we want to become, we need to get rid of that person. Because if we allow that, well, excellence in their job, but inconsistency in the value, and instilling the values of our norms, like then we've got to move on from that person. Because if we allow one jerk to be in the group, then suddenly a couple other people who weren't normally jerks maybe become jerks, or suddenly we start hiring a bunch of jerks, and then they go, wow, this was a great company when it was 50 people, but now it's 100 people, and 7 of them are jerks, and they suck all the life out of the out of the out of the out of the fun factor of the company.
So this is one of the lanes I wanted to drive down with you as a technology CEO, and you teed it up really nicely. I think that oftentimes in the technology space, there is an over-indexing on technical capabilities,
Yeah,
especially. I mean, don't get me wrong. You got to build the tech. It's got to be good tech. It's got to work. It's got to do what you expect it to do. But
yeah,
sometimes even those folks who are poor fit poor fit for the culture get elevated within the enterprise, and the next thing you know, their approach to leadership, their style of engagement, their attitudes are sometimes not helpful to team productivity. And
yeah.
I think a lot of times it gets overlooked, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are about that, specifically as it relates to tech leadership.
Yeah, I think it's rather nuanced, because you can have the best culture in the world. People love working here. They're willing to tattoo the name of the company on themselves because they love working here so much. But if your tech doesn't differentiate itself, it doesn't solve a real world problem, and or your pricing, it doesn't align to your capabilities, you don't have a chance. And unfortunately, sometimes really good tech with terrible cultures still wins the day. Now, flip that around. Um, when I took over 3 years ago, I said to Brett Settle, and I'll tell this story publicly because I've said it in front of the employees, and I know he won't mind, but I said to me, Brett, tell me about the ThreadX culture. And he's like, I don't even, it was like I was speaking Chinese to him. He's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what? People come to work, they do their job, they leave. Like, yeah, but I'm like, what's it all about? Like, how do we demonstrate that when success? How do we celebrate success? Or, what does everybody like when they get together for a beer? And it's like, it was like didn't resonate. And we had our company kickoff at the beginning of this year, and it was an awesome event in Newport, Rhode Island. And by the end of it, I describe it as because we are almost we call it as a virtual company because we're very distributed. But I called it handshakes to hugs over 3 days.
Hmm.
First day everybody's like, "Hey, good to see you in person. Nice to see you." The end of the third day after a couple of nights of big drinking and dinners and lots of team activities, people are like, hugging each other. And Brett at the end of the event or during the event says, Gene asked me what culture was. I didn't know what it was. I look around today, I get what culture is. And we have very low turnover. We're blessed to have a team of people that stay with us for long periods of time, and that is about the culture. And we have our bumps and we have our rough spots from a business perspective, but we got unbelievable technology built by unbelievable people. And I would say underlying that is I made a decision to help create that. And I say help create that. I can't be the only one who gives a crap about culture. We have a culture committee of employees that value try to make this a better place to work. I do my one-on-ones. I ask my leaders and my managers to do one-on-ones. So we've put in place things to help create this thing. But I think the best companies that I've been a part of it have had four things. They've had money. They've had great leadership and great culture. They've had a great product, and then they had unbelievable market timing. And you can't control all those things, but at least you can control the team, the culture, and if you control is a strong word, but if you help to embrace it, you help to develop it, it's a little spark that really can become a really powerful energy within the company. And that'll allow you to solve massive problems that at times feel like, oh, we're never going to be able to compete with this public company. Oh, we're never going to be able to get that release out by that date. But with a culture where people say, hey, your hard work is valued, and we don't start with no, we can't do it. We say, yeah, let's go figure it out. Like those are the exciting parts of, as a CEO of a 50-person company, see those sparks started 3 years ago that are now so much embraced and a part of our ethos. It's fun to be a part of it.
Yeah. So I love all the things you said about the intentionality behind building culture and identifying it as an important component of your operability, right? You see it as
Yeah,
uniquely intertwined with your ability to actually deliver goods, services, tools, whatever it is that you guys are engaging in the market.
yeah,
Um, Tell us a little bit about your introduction to leadership, your status as a CEO, and some of the things you've already said give me clear indication that you're what I would consider a relatively mature leader. In other words,
yeah,
you've seen a lot of what works, and you probably have seen a lot
yeah.
of what doesn't work. When was the first time in your life when the subject of leadership really sort of hit home for you?
Yeah, I mean, I go all the way back to it's maybe a little cheesy, but it's important to me, so I'll still talk about it. But I think about all the way back to working at a movie theater and working for the manager of the movie theater, working at Tony's Pizza, and there's an immigrant lead, running this small business and learning from them what it means to lead and direct and also mentor and coach and give a shit about people. That was my first exposure to like, okay, hey, you know what? You can have an impact on people's lives by simply caring about it. And those early in my career, that was, I mean, starting out my first couple of jobs, I think that was meaningful. And then when I moved into working for some larger companies like Avid Technology or EMC, as an individual contributor, seeing what I really liked about people that I worked for, and equally things I didn't like working for people. EMC was a culture I absolutely loved and thrived in. But I realized it was not for everybody, and it was pretty ruthless. Again, for me that was great. I love there was no ambiguity in terms of what was happening, and they paid you a lot of money to work really hard. But I watched people get spit out of that thing who could have been good. They just need to be a little
Right.
bit, kind of coaxed along the first couple of months to let them figure it out, as opposed to just, and I think that those are the types of things that early in my career, getting to work with different types of leaders and learn different types of leadership styles, that I ultimately started to cultivate who I wanted to be as a leader. And I like to say that I want to be a coach, but at times you have to be a dictator. Like, not everybody can make every decision, and not everything can be democratic. Like, sometimes when a difficult decision needs to be made, we can have like, serious debate, and we can argue. But once a decision's made, and equally, not everybody gets to participate, and the majority doesn't always win. And I think those are the types of things that you learn with experience, because when I first became a manager, you've got that natural inclination of you're managing your friends, your coworkers, who are your peers, and now you're suddenly in the position of the leadership. And lots of things that I did incorrectly, either under indexing, trying to say, hey, look, I'm not going to be like the other guy. I know you all know your job. I'm not going to do anything. And or over indexing, trying to be like, hey, I'll help you close that deal. I'll get, and they're like, dude, so you got to start to develop your own level of confidence in understanding and having it's not instincts, but a feel for those moments, or I'm a feel guy, or you look at the data and the data says, hey, look, it's not going well. You've got to go insert yourself into those types of situations. And I think those are the types of things that, again, going back to the Tony's Pizza or the Cranford Movie Theater, like early days of starting to get exposed to it, and then working for some bigger public companies, and then starting. And I know this is a topic that you and I are super passionate about. As you get into your career, whether as an individual contributor, as a leader, establishing those mentors. And those mentors are not usually your direct line boss, because there's going to be a whole list of questions that you never want to ask your first line boss. You
Right.
don't want your first line boss to know that you are an imposter, that you don't know what you're doing in this job. You got to fake it to them until you make it. But to your mentor, you can go to and say, look, I have this situation. I have to fire this person. I've never fired a person. What do I do? Or I've got this great performer who's a terrible cultural fit. What do I do? Like, having those mentors, and I've been absolutely, I know, like you, because we talked about it before, but absolutely blessed to have some of the smartest people go out of their way to help me, whether it's a good friend of mine like Tom Heiser, who I've known since I was 19 years old, or somebody like a Bob Brennan or a Chris Lynch, who these names wouldn't mean much to our, but these are very, very successful high-tech executives who have absolutely gone out of their way to ensure that I'm successful. And candidly, there was nothing in it for them monetarily. It was purely because somebody did it for them and they wanted to pass it on. So I think for early leaders, going to find those people that are excellent at their job, and investing your time and energy to develop the friendship and the trust that they're willing to give you their time and their guidance. Man, I've saved years of learning by simply sitting with smart people who say, yeah, don't touch that third rail. Like, yeah, I know you want to do that. That's going to feel really good, but that's going to cost you your job, or you're going to lose your team over it. Like, those are the types of things that have made me enjoy my job more, because I'm not having to recreate the wheel. But as a at 54, it's easy to reflect and know what impact that had. At 24, at 34, and I'm sure even at 44, there were many times where I was insistent on, now I'm going to do it a new way, or hey, I'm not going to listen. I'm going to do just the opposite of what somebody told me. And I said to one of my friends, I ultimately started to really make money in my life, and I've been really, really blessed in this industry to be financially rewarded for some of the things I've done. But it was ultimately stop trying to do it my own way. And when somebody says go there or don't do that, listen to them, and it's amazing what happens. It's
So
uh,
you perfectly went into the lanes of the mentoring and talked a little bit about how important it is. I almost veer away from the word mentoring. I like to think of the folks that I have in my life as a sort of a pseudo advisory board, like my own
yeah,
person, my own personal
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
counsel of folks that I turn to help with some of these really tough decisions. And sometimes, like you said, it's just bouncing off your approach to someone else to get a little bit of a sanity check on it as to whether or not it makes sense, whether it's a big decision or engaging with someone else on a really difficult topic. Um, I know from our earlier conversation that you spend quite a bit of your own personal time and cycles providing that kind of a mentorship and advisory piece to others. Tell me about why you think that's so important and why you spend the time doing that, because I think it's important for people
yeah.
to hear, especially from a CEO.
Yeah, I would describe it first as I think I'm actually being selfish. And what do I mean by that? It's like I feel so good when I help somebody else that I almost feel guilty about, right? It's like that really geeks me out, like that I could make an introduction to somebody that I've known for a long time and introduce them to somebody else, and some young person gets a job because of it. Like that, it makes me feel good. That's why I do it. Now the second piece of it is somebody, and many people took time out of their very busy schedules to spend time with me. So I feel like the return is not, I'm not going to give these people anything financially that they couldn't do on their own. So I think my ROI to them is that I'm going to go give it to other people, and make sure that we help other people be successful in this industry. I start with every year trying to help 30 people get jobs. And why 30 people? I don't know. I just picked a number, and it can't be anybody that we hire. Doesn't count in the number. So it's like when a mom or a dad or a Facebook friend or a LinkedIn connection reached out to me, I do everything I can to try to help them get a job. Now, I'm not saying I'm 100%. It's not 100%. Not everybody who's ever reached out to me I've ever helped, but I do strive to be able to do that because it can be lonely for somebody starting out in their career, especially in cybersecurity, we have this weird anomaly of we have 7,000 open positions. We tell all these young people, go get your degrees, go get your certifications, and yet they can't get in because we as hiring managers put in these criteria like entry level with 4 years of experience. Like so we've got to do a better job there. But I do think ultimately, giving back to others, it can make you feel good. It can make life feel more fulfilling, and it doesn't really cost me anything but time, and it's time I'm willing to invest in others because people did it for me.
Yeah, outstanding. And I love that you put a number to it and hold yourself accountable and look to strive towards that. I try and tell folks often about the importance of their network and the
Yes.
willingness to reach out to their network and sort of don't wait until you need something to build the network that's going to deliver
Yes.
what you need. Can you talk a little bit about what role that's played for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's don't get to the middle of the desert to realize you need water, right? And I've got a couple of friends I know every time they call me. It's not very often, and when they do, they need something, but no problem. They're my friends. I'll help them. But it is much nicer to get a call once in a while when somebody doesn't need anything. So when they do need something, they can do that, and it goes to like interviewing, right, or looking. I should say looking for a job, right? If you're just spinning up your network when you need something, it's a little bit more difficult as opposed to think all those people who reached out to you when they were looking for a job and you didn't do anything for them. You didn't even respond and say, hey, can't help you, but hope you're doing well. I know it can be lonely. Like you feed those things when you don't need them. There's a lot of reciprocation to it. And I'm going to sound really old now. I think I said I'm 54 years old, so I am really old in comparison to many of your listeners, I'm sure. But I think I enjoy the virtual work environment. I do. My commute to Boston can be an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, and the days I don't have to do it means I can do a lot more things productively. But I am 54 and I have a robust network, and I get to meet great people like you, and it's still happening. And I think that I said to my daughter who works for a public accounting firm, I said you should go to the office as much as you can so that you can start to develop those friendships. And the story I tell is I worked for a company for 6 weeks, and I didn't like the environment for a multitude of reasons, but I really liked the guy who was second in charge there. A guy by the name of Tony Prigmore, who's part of an analyst firm, Enterprise Strategy Group, and Tony and I in 6 weeks developed a friendship. And now that's 30 years ago. And for 30 years, we've done business together. I've helped mentor his sons. He's helped me at some of my darkest moments in my career. He's always open for lunch. It's like this back and forth. And if I were just a Zoom square at that company for 6 weeks, like there'd be
Never would have
no,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, there'd be no 30-year friendship. And I think about all the people I worked with at EMC, Avid Technology, Avid Sports, Resilient, like all these great companies I'm part of, where I have lifelong friendships that were developed in an interpersonal point of view from being in person, being in the same office, traveling together, and I think that's it's probably $1 billion company out there for somebody that can figure out how to replicate that when we aren't in person.
Yeah.
And it's the informal part of it, right? You go on a Zoom today and it's all business. Like there's 2 seconds of small talk. It's like, let's get it in, let's get it out. Nobody wants to be here, but we need to be there. And then we get off. Like that ability to have that conversation that people normally used to have at walking in the office on a Monday morning, leaving on a Friday. What are you doing on the weekend? How are the kids? What's going on? Oh man, you stubbed your toe. Like all those little things that build stronger bonds with us as human beings isn't happening. I talked with one of my employees the other day, great team member, and I just said, "What do you think the rest of the team thinks about this decision?" And he says, "I don't know." I said, "What do you mean you don't know?" He's like, "I don't really talk to them." I know I get engineers are more introverted, but I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, no, I just do my thing, right? And it's like, that's the thing that when we get back to the network effect, like, again, going back to my daughter, I said, 20 years from now, you're not thinking 20 years in advance in the future, but 20 years from now, all the people you're working for at that accounting firm, they're going to work for you. You're going to work for them. They're going to hire you. You're going to hire them. They're going to be able to give you advice that you didn't know, like all those types of things that I think sometimes people think to be successful in their careers early on, I just have to be really good at my job. I got to be great at selling. I got to be real marketing. I got to be great at writing code. I got to be great at, whatever. But it's much more those intangibles that will make you successful long term. And equally, whether success is important to you or not, or monetary success is important or not, I think having a more fulfilled life is about interacting with as many people as you can, even if you're an introvert. Like a lot of hardcore introverts tell me this as well. Like they'll find different ways to it, but it's like that ability to be a part of the human race and give back and or receive. I think that's what again, as an older guy here, I could say most worries me about this virtual environment where there's a whole bunch of people who started their career during COVID. Some of them had never been in an office in a year and a half, don't know office etiquette, all those types of basic things that you learn early in your career or later in your career when you enter the business world. I think those are the things that are really interesting to me in terms of, again, back to the original point of that network. If you invest in it, you feed it, you care about it, and most importantly, the Ben Franklin principle, you're always giving to it. You're not looking to receive, you're always giving to it. How can I help MK? How can I help this person? How can I have what can I give to that person? If you continuously do that, the boomerang effect of your network, when you're down and out and you've gotten fired from a job or laid off from a job, there'll be 5 people, 10 people, 50 people saying, "Hey, I'm gonna do everything I can to help MK get a job right now." Okay, boom, boom, boom. And I think that's the piece of it that again, in a virtual world, I just don't know how that's going to get replicated, but I'm sure that generation will figure it out. And we had our own sets of challenges and things were different when we were, so it'll work itself out. But it's just something I do think about.
No, it's a fantastic observation. I've had conversations with others around, and I don't think we know the answer to this. And I think that's part of the point you were trying to make is that we don't know how this is going to impact that current generation. You and I had the benefit, I think, of both environments. So we've seen what you can do
Yeah,
in person, networking, just
right.
like you said, the sidebar conversations, the things that people really bond over.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer that in terms of team building, I think it's impossible to create that really strong tissue connectivity between teams without having some kind of in-person component. You
right.
can build the business component, which is that hey, collectively we're looking at one another 2D. There's stuff we need to get done. We agree on the stuff and we go do
Yeah,
it. But when it comes to that real world connectivity, there's nothing I think is going to replace in person. And I think that we will see the impact of that over time as we move forward. What's
yeah. I mean, for
what?
okay.
Yeah, go.
Well, I was just going to say that our 4 tenets are customer first, innovation, urgent accountability, and esprit de corps. And I know you'll know the term, but some of our listeners, it's teamwork in amongst like it's a military term
Yeah.
that we borrowed from, and I think
Spirit of the body, essentially, I
yeah,
think
right,
is probably the
yes, and
Latin
it's
translation.
yeah, and I think about like even that for our culture, like in a virtual world, like how do we develop those things where people truly have the bond, the ability to go to the end of the world to make something happen, and I think that's it's hard to do, and I'm as I say that I've because of budget cuts the second half of the year, we're not having our in-person second half of the year kickoff, and I'm like, are we really representing that esprit de corps if we're not doing it? But anyway, I think that I agree with you very much that it's so difficult, if not nearly impossible, to build that level of camaraderie, that feeling that you can accomplish anything as a team in this virtual environment.
Yeah. One of the questions I get frequently is the jump that folks would like to make from what might be considered manager, senior leader to those executive levels. I get
Uh,
a lot of sidebar conversations with people who are just they feel like they're stuck at that mid management level and they're
yeah,
not getting looked at for VP positions. They're not getting
yeah.
looked at for those SVP opportunities. What do you think is the biggest barrier for folks to make that next
Yeah.
level leap into leadership positions?
Yeah, I think I just posted something on Executive Security Podcast about this. It was the question was, "What's the worst advice you were ever given?" And I remember going to a manager saying, "Hey, I wanted to start to interview for a manager role," and that manager said to me, like, "Hey, you got to realize who you are, and that is you're a great individual contributor. You're not management material." And within about a month, I quit that job because what I realized was I wasn't management material in his eyes, and he was projecting that across the company. And a gentleman by the name of Jack Sweeney, another very successful Boston entrepreneur, VC, he gave me some of the best advice. He said, sometimes you got to get out of the box. He said, and again, at this particular job, I was in a box and it said that I am a very good individual contributor. I am not a manager. And that particular company, I ended up leaving. I started my own business, did it for about a year and a half. It didn't succeed, but I had a lot of fun, and I'll never look back and wonder what happened. I did it. It didn't succeed. I ended up joining another company. That company was then acquired by the original company, and I went back as a VP. So I was an individual contributor. I did my own thing for a year and a half. I joined this company as the VP of sales, and then I get acquired, and now I'm a VP. Now, that's not advice on how you become a VP per se. Like, you hope that you join a company that then gets acquired and you end up as a VP. But the point of the story was I would have never become a VP, or it would have taken me 10, 12, 15 years at this large company to become a VP at the pace at which I was going. But by taking risk and doing something, I ultimately got out of the box and went back to the company. So I think the advice is if you're really in the box and they think you are just a great mid-level manager, sometimes you got to go somewhere else to get that jump, because they just paint you the picture. And again, having been an individual contributor at this company, leave and come back as a VP, there were people at the company who go, "You're not really a VP." Well, let me double check my business card. Like, yeah, no, I am. Like, no, but they again tried to jam you back in the box, and at that point, I didn't have to worry about it because I'd see. So I think it's looking at how long you can be successful at the role, and I think about having been acquired by IBM. There were people that were there 30 years before they became an executive, and I think there were some talented people, and that seems like a long time to achieve it, but that was their journey, right? They loved being a part of IBM, and they were willing to put in the time, and it took them maybe not 30 as an executive, but 25 years of being at the company before they got to that executive level. So I think you have to decide what's your journey, right? And for me, the journey was about moving up. Now, candidly, sometimes I pushed too hard. I took a title with a bad company, and it didn't work out. Or sometimes I was more focused on the next thing. I didn't do my current job well enough. So it's like, why should I get that job? Because I wasn't doing my current job well enough. So I think those are the types of things you have to start to think about. I don't want to say from the beginning, but very, very early, I knew I wanted to be a CEO. That was maniacally focused on what I wanted to become for a long period of my time, and happy that I've achieved it. But it's a rocky, bumpy road along the way to be able to figure out how to do that. So I think the succinct advice would be is you got to think about what others think of you in this individual role, and can you change that? If you can't change that, then unfortunately either accept it and maybe eventually it works itself out. You get a part of a project and they really see what you can do, and that's a great trajectory. And or you might have to look at it and go like, look, they're never going to see me as a VP. They just see me as a senior manager. And at that point, you got to make your decision, and that decision might be to go someplace where they do view you as a manager, and that can be really fulfilling. I've had so many friends who were really bound into and in a box, and when they go to this new company, they value my opinion. The CEO's asking me questions, and when I give answers, they're like, "That's cool," right? They've unlocked themselves, but there's no right or wrong answer to it. You just got to make decisions, and when they work out, they do, and if they don't, you got to course correct to keep course correcting to keep course correcting.
So that's some really awesome advice, and I want some of the listeners to take away the other aspect that you didn't mention by name, but there's a certain amount of risk involved. I think sometimes when you make those decisions, and you have to be ready to assume the risk of, as in your example, taking a step outside of an organization where you may be pigeonholed, and you just have to know that it's going to work out.
Yeah, it is. It's scary. I mean, literally, not to underestimate it. When I left EMC the first time, it was 3 kids, 2 in diapers, finishing up my MBA, and I go to start my own company. Like, I had a good paying job, and Anne Marie was like, "Yeah," and my wife's like, "Yeah, okay, go for it." And, I had her total support, but man, it is taking that leap of faith, and it's lonely and it's uncertain, and there's plenty of self-doubt. But so yeah, and that was, but I had the risk tolerance to be able to do that. if you don't think you have the risk tolerance to do that, and or your partner doesn't have the risk tolerance to do that, don't underestimate those listeners that have a partner. You got to have the risk tolerance of the weaker of the, not weaker of the two, the lesser of the two, right? If your
Right.
partner doesn't have the risk tolerance, because things probably won't go right in the beginning when you switch jobs or when you start something in the beginning, and there could be some self-doubt, and you don't need somebody in your ear going, yeah, that was really stupid, like, why aren't we making this? Yeah. So but yeah.
You touched on something else that's really important. It's actually the subject of a blog that I have coming out in the next week for my leadership student newsletter, and that is what I simply call begin with the end in mind. Identify professionally where you see yourself, and
Yep.
then work backwards from there, and literally make the decisions and choices that you need to make in order to get there. If the end result resonates with your spirit and where it is that you're
Yeah.
headed as an individual, you will make the decisions you need to make in order to
Yeah.
get
Yeah, I
there.
think that's really well said. And I am a very goal-oriented person. I like to write down my goals every year, and some of them are short-term, some of them are long-term. But it at least gives you some North Stars, right? If you, I'll use for our listeners, if you don't have any sort of a North Star in your career, it's like going to look for a new place to live. Well, if you have no North Stars on where you're going to live, you'll be looking in New York City, you'll be looking in DC, you'll be looking in Iowa, you'll be looking in Alaska, you'll be looking in Paris. Like that's what happens with a career with no North Stars at all. And I'm not saying every plan works to perfection, and there's no necessarily happy endings in everything that we do. But if you really start and say, look, I want to become a VP of engineering. That's my, I'm starting out, but I think that's what I do. Or, hey, I'd really like to start my own tech company, or I'd like to start my own fudge company, whatever. That's my North Star. I don't know how I'm going to go from here, but that's my North Star. And then make decisions, and the trade-offs with those decisions, you'll feel at least you have a semblance of moving in the right direction. And or when you're not moving in the right direction and you feel really that stomach churning, like, oh, why do I feel so out of sorts? Because you'll know it's because, hey, I said my North starts here, but I'm heading south. Like, and it that so
Right.
okay, you'll know why. So I think those are the types of things, and you don't have to have it all mapped out. And it's not all a journey of straight lines and up and to the right, and again, happy endings. There'll be things where it won't go well, and that's okay. Course correct and keep moving on. There'll be people you work for who aren't good people, and that'll be really tough, and you'll learn a lot from that. Probably make you the best. You'll probably learn more of that from a really bad manager than any great manager you've ever worked for, because
Absolutely.
you'll really understand what you don't like about what that person does or doesn't do, and the chances of you replicating that behavior are pretty low. So I think those, when you're in pain, your body and your mind will naturally force you to try to get out of those pain points. Those are learning moments. And, so if you've got a job where you're really unhappy, use that energy to go figure out your North Star and get you one step closer to what your North Star is. And I think in the latter part of my career, the harder part is I've always chased the bone. A friend of mine said that and suddenly you get the bone and you go, what's next? And well, what's next? What's next? So I think again, later in life,
Different bone.
yeah, exactly. What I'm starting to do like is, I don't meditate, but I run a lot, and people tell me it's very similar. So what I've really focused on lately is just enjoying the run, and not the beginning of the run, the end of the run, the middle, just when I'm running, what steps I'm
The
about to
journey.
take, yeah, and the journey, and be in the moment of that journey. And I think again that mistakes that I made, really big mistakes I made early in my career, was I was so fixated on when I was an individual contributor, I want to be the manager, I want to be the director, I want to be a senior director, I want to be a VP. And I'm happy to say that the job that really changed that for me was a company called Resilient Systems, and it was a 5.5 year journey, and I enjoyed every second of it. And that was, and then it went to Human, and it had another company had its own quirks, but I enjoyed the journey. And now ThreadX, so I don't know if you have to get into your late 40s or 50s to start to enjoy the journey a little bit more. But again, another piece of advice is, when you have a great job, you have a great manager, you're happy and content. Don't be afraid to be happy and content. Don't be so in a hurry to move to the next thing. I've got a great friend of mine who does tremendously well in high tech sales, and I was having dinner with him, and he said, "Well, I got to go back into management." I said, "Why?" I said, you're 5, 6 years away from retirement. Why do you think you have to get back into management? I said, "You hate people." I said, "You love your customers, but you hate employees. Like, you hate sales." He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why do you feel like, because somebody said you're supposed to? Like, financially, you're not going to do any better." Like, and you're kind of reorganized him, but it's again, I said, enjoy the journey. You got a great job, great company, great technology, unbelievable customer relationships. Why mess with that? Right? That's okay too. Enjoy that journey.
Love it. Hey, Gene, in order to wrap up, I've been talking to all of my guests around uh, um, whether or not leaders are born or made. I know it's a little bit of a trivial question, but
Yeah.
historically one that people have varying opinions on. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on born or made argument in leadership?
I'll come back to it in a second, but I'll start with it took me a while to realize everybody doesn't want to lead, because when you have your own set of glasses on, you think, oh, everybody thinks just like you. So I always thought everybody wants to lead, and then I realized, no, there's quite a few people who are very content to just follow or do their own thing. They don't want to lead anybody; they just want to do their own thing. But I
Lots
think,
of individual contributors out there in the world.
who are awesome and they're great at their job, and they would, they have no desire to do that. So it was just an interesting learning for mid of my career, that everybody didn't want to be the CEO or everybody didn't want to be the VP. But I think it's a combination of both. I think that there is something innate, going back to cavemen, and like, at a certain point there was somebody who had to lead the group to decide to explore larger areas, and I don't think that was a group decision. I think there was, so I think there's some basic instincts of leaders and followers. But with that being said, even if you don't start with that instinct, if the desire is there, I think it is a bunch of learned skills. So I like, writing, learning a new language is a learned skill. So I think there are people that maybe it's not natural. There are natural leaders who, if they were cavemen, they'd be leading the group to another part of the world. But I think, in a self-actualized world where people can learn new skills, I think that people can ultimately learn to be great leaders. If that's, you got to start with the desire
Right.
as the underlying premise. So, but if you're not natural at it, but you desire to do that, I think there are plenty of people who can become great leaders putting their time in.
Gene, fascinating gems. I appreciate your engagement and level of conversation. I knew the conversation would be this good. The time has run by as I
It
expected.
has, yeah, for sure.
What do you want to leave folks with? And it can certainly be anything you want to talk about, leadership
Yeah,
or ThreadX or otherwise.
I mean, I just say, have fun in life. Really enjoy your career, enjoy your family, be in the moment. Take advice from a 54-year-old, and enjoy what you do, and know there are lots of people like you and me out in the world that are willing to help. So if you're in a bad situation, whether it's career or life, reach out. There are people who will answer and do everything they can to try to help somebody get out of the pain of the moment, or help them be successful in their career. It's there's a lot of doom scrolling going on the internet that makes us believe the world is a terrible place. But again, I the absolute pleasure of talking with you, knowing you're a good human being, and I hope to strive to be the same. So know that there are good people out there who are looking out and want you, our listeners, to be successful.
Outstanding. That's it for this episode of the Leadership Student Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Gene Fay, CEO of ThreadX. And thanks to the listeners. We'll see you guys next time on the Leadership Student Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leadership Student Podcast with MK Palmore, part of the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player, subscribe to the ITSP Magazine YouTube channel, and share the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to our conversations and our audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.